when I first got out of jail, like in 89, the end of 89. I didn't want to go back to jail. I wanted to do something with myself.
Snoop Dogg survived the trenches, caught a murder case, and buried family members left and right. Yet, he came out on top as one of the most recognized figures in the game. Let's run it back and see how Calvin Bruce went from hustling on the block to staring down a life sentence in an LA courtroom. From the trenches to the brink, Calvin Cortazar Breeze Jr. came into this world on October 20th, 1971 at Long Beach Community Hospital in Long Beach, California. His biological pops, Vanel Van Nodo, a Vietnam War vet and mail carrier, dipped out on the family just 3 months after Snoop was born and bounced to Detroit. The young and got named after his stepdad, Calvin Cortazar Brutus Sr., who his mom's married shortly after. But that union fell apart, too, when Snoop was only about 4 years deep. His mother, Beverly Lynn Tate, became the rock of that household. She was grinding multiple jobs to keep food on the table while raising Snoop and his brothers in the east side of Long Beach. This was one of the most run-down and dangerous hoods in the city during the 70s and 80s, a time when factories were shutting down, jobs were scarce, and the crack epidemic was about to tear through the community like wildfire. To help out, young Snoop started his own little hustles early, pushing candy door to door, delivering newspapers, and bagging groceries at the local stores. His moms, a devout Baptist who sang in the choir at Golgotha Trinity Baptist Church, put him onto music from jump. She had him singing in the church choir and playing piano before he even hit kindergarten. She schooled him on that old-school R&B and soul, the kind of music that would later shape his whole sound. The nickname Snoopy came straight from his mom's. She called him that because he looked like the cartoon dog from Peanuts and stayed glued to that show. That wholesome little nickname stood in stark contrast to the reality waiting for him outside them doors. In school, Snoop was actually putting in work. By the time he hit 6th grade, he was already spitting rhymes in the hallways, drawing crowds so thick that the principals thought fights were breaking out. He was nice with the football, too, had real scholarship potential as a receiver and defensive back, and he stayed active in church throughout. But the streets were calling. The east side of Long Beach in the late 80s was infested with gang activity. Police was on everybody's neck, and drugs were flooding the neighborhood. Snoop got put on with the rolling 20s neighborhood Crips around 15 or 16 years old. He's always said it wasn't some dramatic initiation.
Kid, it was cool because it wasn't too much violence. It was, all my homeboys, we played football, basketball, we were in that sports or either going to school. But then as we got older, a lot of the homies started getting caught up and gangs started to form, and some of us started.
By the time he was in his late teens and early 20s, Snoop was deep in the trap. He was moving work on the streets, pushing cocaine, which brought fast money, but also brought heat from ops and law enforcement at every turn. Starting around 1989 to 1990, he was getting knocked repeatedly for possession with intent to distribute. One of them cases in 1990 got him sent up to Los Angeles County's Wayside Maximum Security Prison for about 6 months. Coming home from that bit in 89 was a wake-up call.
I first got out of jail like in 89, the end of 89. I didn't want to go back to jail. I wanted to do something with myself. And I just, started becoming dedicated to it, being a student to it, started making tapes and, leaving all the other madness alone on the streets and being more dedicated to rap.
Became his way out. Back in high school, he had linked up with his step-cousin Warren G and his day one homie Nathaniel Nate Doghale, another cat from the church choir, who could sang his ass off. They formed 213 and started laying down tracks, cooking up that gunk sound influenced by cats like George Clinton and the early West Coast pioneers. The big break came when Warren G played one of their demos at a function where Dr. Dre was posted up in 1991. That led to Snoop blessing Dre's track Deep cover in 1992, and the rest was history. Snoop and the homies had been recording in the back of a local record store, and Dre's little brother kept telling him to get his music to Dre, but Snoop knew he...
Like I said, when we was making tapes in the back, me and my homeboys, Dre's little brother was my DJ at the time being, and he was always telling me, man, you need to rap for Dre. And I was like, I know I ain't ready for them yet. They had put Straight Outta Compton out, and I was like, I ain't even on their level yet. So we just went ahead and kept making.
By 1993, Snoop was about to drop Doggy Style, which would go down as the fastest-selling rap debut of all time. He was only 21, on the verge of becoming one of the biggest names in the game. Then, on August 25, 1993, shots rang out near his apartment complex in L.A., and everything he had built was suddenly on the line. That body would have him fighting for his freedom in a courtroom where the odds were stacked against him from the jump, beating the case that should have buried him. The situation that led to the shooting had been brewing all summer in '93. Philip Derium, a 20-year-old dude allegedly running with the buy or sell hustlers, had beef with cats in Snoop's circle. According to the defense, Wamariam and his crew had been tailing Snoop's Jeep on multiple occasions, throwing threats and flashing burners. On August 25, 1993, it all came to a head near Snoop's spot in the Palms, West LA area. Snoop was whipping his black Jeep Cherokee with his bodyguard, McKinley Lee, riding shotgun, and Sean Abrams in the back. When they spotted Wamariam walking through a nearby park, words got exchanged. Lee squeezed from inside the whip. Wamariam got hit in the back and buttocks as he turned to run, and he died right there on the scene. No strap was found on his body. Lapp put out an APB and went hunting. Snoop turned himself in shortly after, rolling up with his lawyers. Both him and Lee got hit with
Yeah, and let me ask you a question. What was that feeling, man? Because there's a lot of young cats out here that think the street life is all that. I remember everybody seen it when you was walking the court when you was a young cat. You going in there, you and Suge and them. What was that feeling, man? Could you describe that feeling to these young cats? It wasn't.
It wasn't nice. It wasn't.
We talking about murder was the case.
When you fighting for your life, when you fighting a murder case, and you in the judicial system, first of all, the system designed to beat you anyway.
The trial kicked off in late 1995 with jury selection starting in November and opening statements in January '96. It went down in L.A. Superior Court in front of Judge Paul Flynn. The prosecution came at Snoop hard, painting him as a shot-calling __ who orchestrated the hit out of revenge. They even tried to use his own bars against him, citing lyrics from Murder Was a Case as evidence of his mindset. This was the first time Snoop ever had real legal representation.
How to carry myself, I didn't know how to act because I wasn't never in a position like that. Normally when I went to court, I would just take the deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have...
Yeah, that was me. I was dead.
Right. So I didn't have none of that. So this is the first time I ever had a lawyer.
The defense squad was loaded with heavy hitters. Johnny L. Cochran, Jr., fresh off getting OJ off the hook, came through alongside David Cannard and Donald Ray. They ran with a self-defense angle, arguing that Warm and his people had been pressing Snoop's crew for weeks before the shooting. Say what you want about Suge Knight, but when it was time to step up for his artist, he put together an elite legal...
When it came to my murder case, if it wasn't for him, I don't know what I would have did, because he was professional enough to know that you need a lawyer. We got to get a defense team. We got to do this. Don't say a word.
How much did your lawyer cost?
Man, we spent about $10 million on that case.
Damn. Just to get you out. He spent $10 million cash.
At least, because the case went on for 3 years.
The trial brought some game-changing tactics that courts had never seen before. Snoop's legal team put together video reenactments of the shooting, something that was unheard of at the time to show the jury exactly
introduced in court. So we had to reenact what had actually happened through a video that my attorney was willing to found a way to put together, so it was like a reenactment like you see now when you watch those shows, the first 48 and all that. You see them we was the first ones to do that.
The jury went into deliberations on February 20th, 1996. After 4 days of going back and forth with folks worried they might be deadlocked, the panel came back and acquitted both Snoop and Lee on all the murder charges. On February 21st, 1996, they hung on the voluntary manslaughter charge, which the DA eventually dropped. The juror said the self-defense argument was solid, and they didn't trust how the cops and prosecutors had handled things. The whole ordeal took a major toll. The legal bills ran somewhere between $5 and $10 million. On the emotional side, Snoop dealt with house arrest, constant death threats, and leaned hard on the weed to cope. He has talked about praying every night, fearing they might give him the needle, and going through a real spiritual transformation during.
Possible for you to kind of map out a future for yourself, or are you taking it like as it comes at the moment?
I gotta always have a plan, you know what I'm saying, for the future, but I like to take it day by day because nobody's promised tomorrow.
As a result, is it possible for you to kind of map out a future for yourself, or are you taking it like as it comes at the moment? I always have a plan. You know what I'm saying. For the future, but I like to take it day by day cause nobody's promised some more. After beating the case, Snoop made a conscious decision to switch up his whole vibe. He toned down the gangster posturing on 1996 Thor Dogfather and started pushing more peaceful energy. He had survived what so many of his peers didn't. But surviving meant watching the people around him fall, and the bodies were about to start stacking up, watching the homeless get laid out. The mid-90s hip-hop scene was dominated by the East Coast. West Coast beef that had the whole culture on edge. The media was fanning the flames. Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records were going at each other's necks. And rappers were trading shots on wax and in interviews like it was nothing. Snoop's connection with Tupac started in late 95 when Pac got out the pen and signed with Death Row. These two West Coast legends, both product of the struggle, both shaped by poverty and gang culture, had crazy chemistry in the studio. Pac pushed Snoop to go harder during sessions for All Eyes on Me and the Death Row compilations. They cooked up classics like two of America's Most Wanted and Got My Mind Made Up. Snoop always held Pac in high regard. He saw him as an equal or even bigger, and he was the one who pushed for Pac to join the Death Row roster in the first place. But in my eyes, he was always big as me or bigger than me. He was out before me. You get what I'm saying? So, he was my peer, but at the same time, it was a level of respect. So, it was never about him being bigger than me.